And just when I was gonna get into college football this season. Grossi Posse Packer Nation! Welcome to another episode of Packcast, a podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Can we just play football in New Zealand? Because they don't seem to have a problem with the coronavirus. Grossi, and today we're going to be talking about the potential of college football being canceled and how that will have an impact on the NFL, and also how it could make Brian Gutekunst look like a genius. Before we get to that, I want to do a big shout and thank you to some brand new patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy. We got Keith Peterson, we got LV Raiders NL up into the 1919 tier. We have Sergey Karakalchu, which, by the way, is a phenomenal last name and is one of the greatest I've ever heard in my lifetime. We got Dante01092 upgrading as well. And finally, we have Greg Morin. Thank you very much for your support. It is much appreciated. Now, there's nothing finalized yet of what's going to happen with the college football season. However, over this past weekend, meetings were had, and let's just say what came out of them doesn't seem to be a good thing. So the commissioners of the Power 5 conferences held an emergency meeting on Sunday to discuss the fate of fall college football. You also had reports coming out from like Dan Patrick that said that the Big Ten presidents met over the weekend and they voted 12-2 to cancel the fall season. However, the Big Ten came out with a statement today, said that no plans have been finalized as of yet. And right now we're just waiting to see what programs are going to come out next and say either we're not having football at all or we're talking about potentially postponing it into the spring. You also had Trevor Lawrence and other high-profile NCAA athletes come out and said that they want to play with the We Want to Play hashtag, and they also called for representation. They called for a College Football Player Association, which would be a tremendous deal. There has been this ongoing debate on if NCAA athletes should be paid, and there has been some movement on that front. Earlier this year, it was reported that NCAA players will actually get paid for their likeness as long as the university is not actually paying them. And if you're following all of these issues and it just seems fragmented and scattered, yeah, that's kind of the problem that's going on right now, because there's no real leadership when it comes to the NCAA. They're an organization that makes a crap ton of money, and yet their players have very little say on what goes on with it. So you have guys like Trevor Lawrence, who was obviously going to be a top 5, if not the number 1 pick next year when the Jaguars selected there. And so that is bringing some pressure to the NCAA, because Lawrence is kind of just advocating, saying, hey, you know, we should have the option to play, because if you're going to have players that are going to opt out for their family or for their health, makes total sense. However, there are some guys that are not going to get this chance again. If they're seniors right now, they're not going to be able to play football again next year. So this is their last audition for the majors. You even had guys like Joe Burrow tweeting out saying that if this had happened last year, he would probably be looking for a job right now. Joe Burrow was nowhere near the number 1 pick before last season, and obviously had one of the greatest college football seasons of all time, which catapulted him to be the number 1 pick chosen by the Bengals. And at the same time, you do have to obviously worry about the health and safety of everybody. Now, some of the criticisms of allowing players to play would be, listen, these are college kids, they're not going to be socially distancing, they're going to be on campus. But the fact that we're bringing them back to campus in a lot of these places, you know, it's going to allow for the spread of the virus. But at the same time, you have players who are arguing, listen, like if I am playing this sport, I'm going to be more cognizant of what is going on. I'm going to make sure that I socially distance because I don't want to contract this and I don't want to spread it. So I'm going to be super duper careful so I can continue to play that sport. And the ultimate problem is that honestly, just no one has any idea of what's going on. Obviously, the situation with coronavirus is very, very fluid. It is constantly changing. And in this country, we do not have it under control at the moment. But basically, in order to make it work, you would need a ton of oversight. You would need a ton of protocols and regulations that every single player would have to follow. And at this point, we're kind of in the 11th hour. It's going to be really, really difficult to implement those when we're how many weeks away from the start of the supposed season. Brian Gutekunst was actually asked in a press conference today about this, about scouts, about what they would do. And they said they're kind of just flexible right now. And what they would have to look at is if this season is canceled, they're just going to have to rely on last year's tape. Right now, the 2021 NFL draft is scheduled from April 29th to May 1st. And Goody said it, there's going to be a draft. They're going to have to get players, and it's just going to be a kind of toss-up, meaning like, well, hopefully this person is still good after not playing football for a year if the season gets canceled. So yeah, next year's draft could be super duper interesting in that we have no new footage of these players, and you're gonna have to say, okay, was that 1 year that he had 2 years ago a fluke? Do we think he's still going to be good? And that brings me to talking about the 2020 NFL draft. Now, myself included, and many Packers fans and just NFL football fans alike have criticized the 2020 Packers draft class, right? The drafting of Jordan Love or A.J. Dillon or Josiah DeGuara, and going after them, basically saying, why are you getting these guys? Now, if there is no college football this season, Goody will look like a genius for that. And here's why. So next year, the Packers are going to have to deal with a ton of free agents. So David Bakhtiari, Corey Linsley, Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones, Kevin King, Kenny Clark, etc. And so right off the bat, you don't know if you're going to be able to bring back a guy like Aaron Jones. Now, if Aaron Jones walked because we could not afford him, what we would have to do for the 2021 draft is draft his replacement. Yes, we could keep Jamal Williams, right? And he can kind of keep the boat afloat in the meantime, but you'd have to go and draft his replacement. So now you're going to be drafting a running back who you haven't seen play football for an entire season. And so that's going to make things incredibly difficult. So that would be a major problem. So the fact that we went out and got Dillon and he's going to be able to play a, hopefully, full season this year behind Aaron Jones, now they're not going to be stuck in a bind. But we can go further and look at the Jordan Love pick. So with Jordan Love, if Aaron Rodgers, I don't think this is going to happen, but if Aaron Rodgers has a really down year, if he's just not great, or, we talked about this before, a lot of people said we could have waited until this coming year's draft to draft Aaron's replacement. He could sit behind him for 3 years, and that would be that. Well, if we didn't draft Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers had that down year, or we were looking for a replacement, same exact thing with A.J. Dillon. We would have to go and look for our next franchise QB who hadn't played football in a year and going off tape that's over a year old, which is not an ideal circumstance. So, not saying that Goody planned this or anything like that. I won't give him the foresight of the gods, but I will say that this could make that decision look even better, because come the 2021 draft, good God, can't wait to see what those mocks look like if the college football season is canceled. It is going to be pandemonium, chaotic, and I would say one of the craziest and most uncertain drafts we have seen in a long time. So I feel for all the college athletes that may not be able to participate in their last year of sports, which is heartbreaking because, as I said before, this is their last shot to basically show the majors like, hey, like, I deserve to be here. You're going to have people who won't get their shots. Now, maybe in terms of football, this will lead to gold mines in the undrafted free agency realm. But for those who had a dream to be drafted into the NFL, it may fall short and they may not be able to play football because they didn't have that amazing senior year. And even if the season gets postponed into the spring, you're going to see a lot of craziness as you're going to see the combine is going to start up. Of course, you're going to have the Senior Bowl. Who knows when that's going to happen? And then, of course, you have the draft. And so there's going to be very little downtime if it gets postponed for scouts to go out, analyze these players and be like, here you go. Yeah, these are the people that we should draft. So even if you don't watch college football, which honestly, I don't. I only watch tape of players when the draft is coming around just so I can look at it and be like, okay, I think that person is going to be a boom or a bust. But whatever happens in college football is going to have a direct impact on what the league is going to look like next year. So we'll keep you posted. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy on all social media, see down below. Check out Patcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course, YouTube. And a big shout and thank you to all the patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy and the YouTube members. We'll be streaming Madden Mondays tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you there. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.